Hello, and welcome to today's episode. If you've already heard the introduction before, then just skip ahead about 4 minutes. Otherwise, the Bible is referred to as the living Word of God. It isn't a book that is meant simply to be read. It is a perspective-altering substance that is meant to be ingested and absorbed into you. And when it becomes a part of you, it changes you. And that is exactly what it is meant to do. A psalm is a spiritual song based on real-life experiences that reveal a profound foundational insight that is then expressed in the form of music, which is usually played on a harp. This is my own paraphrase of the Psalms. Now, there is an important difference between a paraphrase and a translation, and it is important to understand what that difference is. A translation takes a text word by word, and it finds the most accurate word in another language to convey the meaning of that original word. But sometimes getting the details right can come at the expense of the big picture. For example, the literal translation for a butt dial and the literal translation for a booty call could end up being exactly the same if they were both translated very literally into another language. But we all know that those are two very different ideas. A paraphrase, on the other hand, is attempting to capture the spirit of the idea that is being expressed. But both approaches come with their own disadvantages. Sometimes, the most literal translation for each word, while technically accurate, loses something in its translation. For example, if you were to translate the phrase, "cat got your tongue," into another language, it would make no sense to them. Why would a cat grab your tongue? What are you even talking about? In order to convey the original idea, you would have to find out which saying is used in that other language to express the same concept, but it might not involve a cat, or even any animal at all, and so the literal translation would not be a very accurate one. But in a case like the one that I just described, the idea is more important than sticking to a very literal translation that loses all of its intended meaning. However, because paraphrases are an individual's interpretation of the underlying idea, instead of a rigorous academic translation of the word, they are not as objectively accurate as a translation is. A paraphrase is a lot more subjective, and that makes it much more susceptible to interpretations that are way off the mark of the original text's intent. The focus of a translation is on detailed accuracy, and sometimes the broader picture is not conveyed very clearly as a result. The focus of a paraphrase is on painting that big picture, but it often loses the accuracy of the finer details. Both are useful as long as you understand which is which, and what the disadvantages to each approach are. And that is why I recommend using both an accurate translation, like the New American Standard, and a responsible paraphrase. In this psalm, there are 9 different locations and groups of people that are singled out by name, according to their relationship with God and the fate that they will experience based on that relationship. So it is helpful to understand who those groups were and the broad strokes of the history at play here in order to really understand this psalm. The first place that is mentioned is Shechem. Shechem was an ancient city in the land of Canaan, where Abraham first received God's promise to give him and his descendants that land for all time. This event was recorded in Genesis 12. Shechem was also where the law was read by Joshua when that promise was about to be fulfilled. That event was recorded in Joshua 24. After the Israelites settled the land given to them by God, Shechem was designated as a city of refuge, where someone who had accidentally committed manslaughter could flee to live safely until he was tried. If they were found guilty of murder, they would be handed back over for execution. If they were found guilty of manslaughter, they could remain safely inside the city for the rest of the high priest's life, after which they could resume their old life elsewhere without the risk of lawful vengeance being taken on them. In this psalm, God asserts his own right to divide up and give away Shechem to the people that he chooses. It is also interesting to note that later in the New Testament, Jesus broke Jewish precedent by interacting with a mixed-race Samaritan woman at a well known as Jacob's Well, which sits near the city of Shechem. In that conversation, Jesus and this woman discussed what it actually meant to worship God in spirit and in truth. That conversation was recorded in John 4. The valley of Sukkoth was situated east of the Jordan River, north of the Jabbok River, near a place known as Penuel. This place was associated with both Jacob's and Gideon's story. After his reconciliation with his estranged twin brother Esau, Jacob traveled to this site where he built booths or temporary shelters to rest in, giving the place its name and establishing it as a place of rest and provision that would always serve as a reminder to the Jews of how God cares for his people. The Feast of Tabernacles, or booths, Sukkot, which is still celebrated to this day, also commemorates this same aspect of God's provision and guidance during the Israelites' 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, during which time they all lived in booths. When the Israelites finally reached the Promised Land, it was divided up between the 12 tribes of Israel. This valley region, with its rich clay soil, was given to the tribe of Gad. The people of Sukkoth were also featured in the book of Judges when they refused to offer aid to Gideon's weary troops. Gideon later punished them for their inhospitable actions. In this psalm, God singles out this site to be distributed according to his wishes. One generation later, Sukkoth would become the place where the metalwork and the furniture for Solomon's temple were made. In this psalm, God also declares his ownership of Gilead, which was a mountainous, pasture-rich region full of flocks located east of the Jordan River and known for its strategic location on the King's Highway. It was most famous for the balm of Gilead, a salve which was used for healing a variety of ailments. This salve was produced from the local plants, and this famous treatment became a metaphor for a universal cure of both spiritual and physical healing. The name Gilead first appeared during Jacob's final meeting with his treacherous father-in-law Laban in Genesis 31, where they erected a pile of stones to stand as a witness to the agreement that they had made there to stay out of each other's lands and live in peace without either of them trying to cross and harm the other. The same area was eventually settled by the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and half of the tribe of Manasseh, whose grandson was named Gilead. This was another place of refuge that served as a land of asylum for Israelites who had unintentionally committed manslaughter, and it personally served as a place of refuge for King David, the author of this psalm, during the insurrection that was led by his son, Absalom. This event is recorded in 2 Samuel 17. The Gileadites were known for their faith and their struggles against aggressive neighbors like the Ammonites. Later, the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser III invaded Gilead and exiled its inhabitants. This event is recorded in 2 Kings 15. It is also worth noting that this region was the home of the great prophets Elijah and Elisha. The fourth place that is mentioned in this psalm is not actually a place. It was a group of people. Manasseh was the oldest son of Joseph, born to him and his Egyptian wife Asenath in Egypt. And Manasseh became the patriarch of one of the 12 tribes of Israel. Half of the tribe of Manasseh settled east of the Jordan River, while the other half was associated with the tribe of Ephraim, Manasseh's younger brother, and together they settled in the central part of the land of Israel. In this psalm, God singles out the tribe of Manasseh as belonging to him. But later on, another Manasseh, who was the king over the southern kingdom of Judah for 55 years, engaged in extreme forms of evil, including sacrificing his own sons to idols, practicing dark magic, and shedding much innocent blood. After being taken captive, King Manasseh sincerely repented, turned to God, and was restored to his kingdom. Upon his return, he removed all of the idols and their altars from his land, restored the altars of the Lord, and encouraged the people to serve God. His story symbolizes that genuine repentance can lead to restoration and forgiveness even after extreme sin. It highlights the vast limitlessness of God's mercy. Ephraim was the second son of Joseph, who fathered the tribe of Ephraim, one of the 12 tribes of Israel. His name means fruitful, reflecting God's blessing and abundance even in the midst of unbearable suffering, as stated by Joseph in Genesis 41:42. For God has made me fruitful even in the land of my affliction. Now, despite being Joseph's sons, Ephraim and his older brother Manasseh were both treated as equal heirs among their uncles by their grandfather Jacob when the time came to pass out his inheritance. But just as Jacob had received the greater blessing despite being the second-born son, he likewise passed on the greater blessing to Ephraim, and not to his older brother Manasseh. Ephraim became the ancestor of Joshua, the successor to Moses, who led the Israelite tribes in the conquest of the Promised Land. The entire tribe of Ephraim settled in the fertile, hilly region of central Israel. The tribe's territory included important religious centers like Shiloh and Bethel. In this psalm, God declares that Ephraim is the helmet on his head, conferring a position of high status by linking this tribe to the most important piece of armor that a warrior has. Once again, God reinforced that the higher blessing was being given to what was considered at the time to be a lower-ranking son. Later on, the tribe of Ephraim fell from this elevated position. Following the split of the kingdom, the warrior tribe of Ephraim became a dominant force, so much so that the entire northern kingdom was referred to as the Kingdom of Ephraim. The first king of the northern kingdom, Jeroboam I, was an Ephraimite, and he established calf worship, which continued to be a major spiritual failing of the northern kingdom for the rest of its existence. The prophets, especially Hosea, often used Ephraim to represent the spiritual and moral corruption of the entire northern kingdom, warning the people of Israel against following Ephraim's example when it came to idolatry and their unfaithfulness to God's covenant. Judah was the last tribe to be mentioned in this psalm. He was the fourth son of Jacob and his first wife, Leah, who founded the highly influential tribe of Judah, from whose lineage the Davidic kings and Jesus Christ were descended, making the name significant in both Jewish and Christian theology. The Lion of Judah is a significant symbol and title, most notably applied to Jesus Christ in the Christian tradition, signifying his royal authority as the Messiah and King. Judah played a significant role in the story of his brother Joseph. While the oldest brother Reuben snuck away to gather the means of rescuing Joseph from the 8 brothers who wanted to murder him, Judah talked them into selling their baby brother into slavery instead. Later, Judah became the victim of similar treachery himself when his widowed daughter-in-law, Tamar, disguised herself and conceived twin sons with him. But Judah did seem to sincerely regret his past sins, and later he demonstrated a profound change of character through an act of impressive selflessness by offering to become a slave in place of his youngest brother Benjamin. Even though he was not the firstborn, Judah is depicted as a leader among his brothers, a relationship that was echoed in the position that his tribe held. Jacob blessed Judah with the assurance that the scepter, or ruling royal line, would remain with his tribe. This promise is again confirmed by God in this psalm when he calls Judah his scepter, or lawgiver. 2 generations later, after the kingdom of Israel divided, the southern kingdom became known as the Kingdom of Judah, and it included the cities of Jerusalem and Bethlehem. This kingdom was composed of the 2 tribes that remained loyal to the Davidic line, which makes sense because not only had this tribe learned the lesson of loyalty like their patriarch, but the tribe of Judah was the source of that Davidic line, meaning that King David, who authored this psalm, and his descendants came from this tribe. The next group to be mentioned was Moab, who was the son of Lot, Abraham's nephew. Moab was conceived through a drunken act of incest between Lot and his oldest daughter, and he became the ancestor of the Moabite people. The Moabites were never part of the Israelite people, and they had their own distinct nation on a fertile plateau east of the Dead Sea in what is now Jordan. Their relationship with the Israelites was complex and often marked by conflict, such as when their king oppressed the Israelite people for 18 years in the book of Judges. But despite the Israelites' abhorrence of the Moabites' idol worship and their sacrifices to Chemosh, there were rare examples of intermarriage, as exemplified by Ruth, King David's own Moabite great-grandmother, which placed her in the lineage of Christ as well. Although that marriage was exemplary, that result was only because Ruth had already converted to Judaism and assimilated to Jewish ways. Most of the time, there was not a happy ending to these kinds of marriages, and Moabite women led the Israelites into idolatry at Baal of Peor, resulting in a devastating plague. The Hebrew prophets of the Bible condemned Moab for their arrogance, their idolatry, and their hostility towards Israel, foretelling their eventual judgment and destruction. And indeed, Moab was conquered by the Assyrian Empire in the 8th century BC, and later on by the Babylonians. By the Roman era, the land of Moab had been absorbed into the broader Arab territories, and it eventually vanished as a distinct kingdom. But that was all after David's time. In this psalm, God refers to Moab as his washbul. They are allowed to serve him, but in a reduced way, with access only to the lowest form of servitude. They are not accepted on equal footing with the rest of the people of Abraham. Then God moves on to outright rejection, starting with Edom. Edom refers to the land that was occupied by the descendants of Esau, the older twin brother of Jacob, also known as Israel. The Edomites inhabited the mountainous region south of the Dead Sea in what is now southwest Jordan. The land's location on important trade routes and its copper industry contributed to its prosperity. Despite the familial connection, the Edomites often acted as enemies to Israel. During the exodus of the Hebrew slaves, the Edomites refused to allow their newly freed relatives to pass through their land into their own. In this psalm, during which King David is battling the Edomites, God rejects Edom and throws his shoe down on them. This is meant as an insult in his triumph over them. Later, prophets like Ezekiel and Obadiah foretold Edom's punishment for its cruel actions against Judah, particularly its celebration of Jerusalem's fall. After being conquered by the Babylonians, the Edomites migrated into southern Judea, where they were known as Idumeans. In New Testament times, an Idumean named Herod was made king of Judea despite not being a Jew. He was a figure known even in Rome for his insane cruelty, and locally for the slaughter of the innocents at the birth of Christ. The Edomite nation eventually disappeared from history. Its people were simply absorbed into the people of the surrounding areas. The ultimate climax of God's rejection in this psalm is declared against Philistia, the land of the Philistines, a powerful people who lived on the southeastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea in what is now called the Gaza Strip. The Philistines are associated with the Sea Peoples, an ancient group of maritime raiders, aka marauding pirates, who invaded Canaan around the 13th century BC. Known for their advanced weaponry and war chariots, the Philistines were an incredibly aggressive, perpetually warring people. They were constant antagonists to the Israelites, as repeatedly detailed in the book of Judges, as well as the books of Samuel and Kings. Their civilization was centered around 5 major city-states: Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, and Gath. They worshipped several false deities, such as Dagon, whose temple was mentioned in Judges, when it was destroyed by the now blind Samson, who ultimately gave his life to destroy that temple and the brutal warriors who were inside of it. Later on, during a battle at Ebenezer, the Philistines captured the Israelite Ark of the Covenant, only to voluntarily return it after experiencing divine judgment in the form of severe plagues. The iconic battle between David and the Philistine giant Goliath is another famous encounter between these two peoples. The Philistines eventually faded from their prominence, and their cities fell under the control of the Assyrian and Babylonian empires after Nebuchadnezzar II's campaign in the 7th and 6th centuries BC. The name Philistia was the foundational root word for the Greek version of that name, Palestiniae. This word was then weaponized by the Roman colonizers to humiliate the conquered indigenous people, the Jews, by taking their name for their own country, Judea, the land of the Jews, and demeaning them by renaming the entire region after their oldest enemy, thereby inventing the very first use of the name Palestine. In this psalm, God reserves his harshest rejection of all for Philistia, promising that they will cry out in the anguish of defeat because of his actions to guarantee that outcome for them. So, in this psalm, which is set during a battle, God progresses through a hierarchy of relationships with him and declares their results. He starts with 2 locations that are both filled with history and heavy symbolic meaning, and he declares his right to divide those fertile regions up and give those blessings to the people he chooses. Then he declares ownership of an even more symbolically significant region and its people. But he has no intention of dividing this place between various groups. It is simply his. Then he says the same thing again, but not about a place, about a people, the tribe of Manasseh. Then he turns to another tribe, Ephraim, who is not only his, but is blessed by the high status position that God has conferred on them. And finally, the highest position of all is confirmed as belonging to the tribe of Judah, from which the ruling Messiah will come. Then God pivots in the opposite direction. Moab, in modern-day Jordan, will not be rejected outright, and they will be allowed to serve God, but in a distinctly lower capacity, holding the most subservient position that does not include outright rejection. Edom is not even given that option. It is insulted, stomped on, and defeated. And the climax of God's rejection is reached in Philistia, or modern-day Gaza/Palestine, whom God not only fully rejects, insults, and defeats, but does so with such deliberate attention that they are doomed to wail in their defeat and rejection. Psalm 60, for the music director to teach and to instruct others. Set to the Lily of Testimony, a record of the memorable thoughts that David had when he fought the Arameans of Mesopotamia and the Arameans of Zobath. Then Joab returned and killed 12,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt, in 2 Samuel 8. Divine Creator, you have turned your back on us. You have crushed and scattered us because you were angry. But now restore the former relationship between us and turn back to us once again. You have made the ground beneath our feet shake until it has split open. Now heal those rifts, because it is all starting to collapse. You have brought your people to challenging times of hardship. You have had us drink the disorienting wine of bewilderment until we are staggering from it. Even so, you have planted a miraculous banner for those who revere you to rally around in battle. And the banner that has been unfurled for them is the truth. Pause to reflect deeply on that. You have done this so that the people that you cherish most would be saved. So hear me now and answer us. Save us with your dominant hand. The divine Creator, in his own sacredness, promised, with joyful triumph, I will personally divide up Shechem and hand out shares in the Sukkoth Valley. Gilead is mine, and Manasseh is mine, also Ephraim, who defends and protects my head like a fortress. I have chosen Judah to rule as my lawgiver. Moab serves only as my washbowl. I will throw my shoe down on Edom in triumph, and Philistia will cry out loud because of me and the crushing defeat that I will bring about. So who will take me into the heart of this fight and storm their fortified city? Who will lead the way with me into Edom? Won't you do it, divine Creator, who has thrown us away and did not advance with our armies? Help us defeat our adversary, for the help of other men is worthless, as is any form of saving grace that mortal beings can offer to each other. In God, we shall fight valiantly and obtain the victory, for he will trample the enemies who oppress us. I pray that whatever voice God might choose to give me in this world, he would also give me the words that I should use them for. These words had meaning for me, and if they had some meaning for you as well, then I am truly grateful that we have both been given a gift from above and from each other. Have a good day out there, my friends.